Broadcasting under the night sky from the edge of an undisclosed jungle on the Gulf of Mexico, I'm Christopher Garitano, your voice in the night. For the next hour, allow me to be your guide into the bizarre unknown, the fantastic macabre, and together we'll journey to that borderland between fiction and reality, a place beyond all rational explanation. We are now off to the witch.
In a room next door, a man is suspended in a contraption called the witch's cradle, his eyes covered, his earphones playing constant static. These two are clearing their minds. They are going through something called sensory deprivation, preparing them for an ESP experience. In the Soviet Union, a film tells of a Russian woman who claims she can move objects across a table without touching them by means of psychokinesis, the energy that pours out of her fingertips, a phenomenon that defies the laws of physics.
That was from a vintage 60 Minutes documentary, taking seriously the psychic phenomena known as ESP. Extrasensory perception is an uncharted ability that's been documented throughout human history, a mysterious function of the human mind that can see and feel beyond the 5 physical senses. Many of us have undoubtedly experienced ESP in one form or another. Tonight's guest claims to have an extraordinary ability to not only see future events, but also communicate with beings from beyond. We'll hear her story after this commercial break.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
You are listening to the Off to the Witch podcast, where we explore that bizarre borderline between fiction and reality and all subjects arcane. Journey over to my YouTube channel and subscribe now at youtube.com/@offtothewitch for a variety of extras and special features, including the Off to the Witch mini docs with further insights on many of the latest episodes, as well as previews and behind the scenes of my forthcoming investigative series, Off to the Witch Presents, as well as the anniversary edition of my motion picture documentary, Montauk Chronicles. And follow us on social media. All links are available at linktree.com/Garitano7, GARETANO7, and stay tuned for more Off to the Witch.
Every 10 or 15 years, a film is produced that is so overwhelming, so forceful in its impact, that it becomes deeply embedded in the mind and changes for all time those who see it. We think The Psychic is such a film. Its intensity may be more than some wish to be exposed to, and those people should be forewarned. Just imagine how frightening it is to suddenly find that you can see into the future, and how much more terrifying it is to see in that future your own murder. And then, worst of all, no one will believe you. Jennifer O'Neill is the psychic.
Welcome back to Off to the Witch. I'm your host, Christopher Garitano. And tonight's guest, Allie Bennett, has experienced a sixth sense consistently since she was a child, meeting spirits of deceased human beings, premonitions of future events, and even dark entities have recognized her gift. Tonight, she shares her amazing and sometimes chilling story with us. So here's my interview with Allie Bennett.
So I was born in Peoria, Illinois. I've lived in Illinois my whole life. I've never really traveled far out of the Midwest, kind of always been here. And I live in Washington, Illinois now. This is actually the town I lived in when I was younger as well. I would have been about the same age as my daughter when we lived here. And while living here, that's when I started to have my most vivid experiences as a child. At the house we lived in, my childhood home, was only about 4 blocks away from where I live right now. And the first kind of crazy experience I had where my parents knew that there was something different about me happened in that home. We had a neighbor that I was very close to, was an older lady, and I went over to see her every day. And on a particular day in the summer, I went out to see her like I always did. And when I saw her, she looked very different. She had very blue lips. She was very pale. She just looked very gaunt, not like her. She looked scary. I remember being very intimidated by her, which is not something I would have normally felt from her. And so I ran to get my mom, and I told my mom what I had saw, and my mom told me, she's okay, just go play. I'll go call her later or something like that. And so I kept telling my mom, like, no, something's wrong, please listen to me. And eventually I did get my mom to come outside, but she didn't see her, only I saw her. And so my mom thought I was just being a kid and told me to knock it off. And then all of a sudden, I'm still seeing my neighbor, and my vision kind of like locks onto her. And I start having visions of what happened to her and how she died. And come to find out later on, that day she was murdered by her son. And the police showed up at my parents' house and told my mom, you know, your neighbor's life's been taken. We need to ask you some questions. And when that happened, my mom had known everything I had seen in the vision that I had. And I told my mom, and my mom told the police. And the police are like, you're sure you didn't see anything? You're sure that, you weren't in the house or whatever? And I was like, no, I wasn't. My mom told them that she was with me the entire time, and there's no way. And that was kind of the first very validating experience that I had, as unfortunate as it was. Yeah, it was wild.
Do you remember your mother sitting you down maybe that night after the police left and having a conversation with you to find out more from you?
Yeah, so my mom knew since I was born that I was different, but I don't think she quite comprehended how different I was, because medium abilities and psychic abilities run in my family. They've been in my family for generations and generations. So she knew it was kind of inevitable that I would have something too. And so I do remember her taking me aside that night and was just like, you know, what you can do is amazing, but you're in control of it and nobody gets to tell you what to do with it. So if you don't want to use it, you don't have to. And if you do want to use it, then you can. And not to be afraid of the things that I see, as scary as they can be, because again, I'm in control of that. If I want it to stop, I can make it stop. And she, that evening, started to teach me how to take control of my ability. And I was only like 4 or 5 years old. So she modified in all the exercises and everything to the best of her ability. But if it wouldn't have been for her teaching me how to open and close, my door to my gifts, then I can't imagine how I would feel today.
Did your mother particularly have the same gift as you?
So she does have some sort of ability. It's kind of like mine, but a little different. So hers is way more premonition based, where mine is more of communicating with the deceased or different entities and whatnot. Hers is definitely more, I'd say, like physical based.
So, in other words, she can lay hands on someone and learn something
Yes.
about them that's not
Yeah, absolutely.
apparent. Okay. And in your case, and this has been happening since birth, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So, in your case, when you're about to have a vision of something and when it's about to come on, do you have any physical feelings? Are there any, is there any dizziness, or are there any weird vibrations in the body?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I'm just having a conversation with my husband and all of a sudden I start to begin to have a vision, what will happen is I kind of get goosebumps all up my arms and down my legs, and then I kind of freeze, kind of like a deer in a headlights, is what my husband says it looks like from his perspective. And during that time when the vision is coming to me, everything else around me kind of slows down. So I'm just focused on what I'm seeing and what's coming to me. The closest thing I can compare it to is like when Spider-Man has like his spidey sense and everything kind of slows down because he's focusing on where the sound is coming from. That's exactly what it feels like for me.
That's interesting. I wonder if those things are translated into film from people who have experienced that particular feeling.
Yeah, that's true. I never thought about it like that.
Speaking of movies, did you? Okay, so you had this ability since birth. Was there a
Mhm.
film or a book or a TV show that you saw when you were a kid that you instantly recognized and could relate to in
Oh,
terms of
yeah.
your ability?
Oh, yeah, I've always loved film too, so that was, like, my escape and a way for me to find something that didn't make me feel crazy, because even though I knew what I was doing wasn't, like, a mental illness, it was, like, legitimately part of me, it was still hard as a child to feel like a normal kid, so I watched a lot of different movies. My favorite one, though, was probably Talking to Heaven with Ted Danson. It's a very underrated movie, people don't talk about it very much, but that's probably the most realistic movie I've seen as far as to what I experience as a medium. I'd say that or either, what's it called? A Ghost Whisperer too. That was a really good TV show. I loved that growing up too.
Wow. And as a kid, did you share these stories and experiences with other kids? And if you can tell me if you're comfortable with it, tell me the good and bad of that.
Oh, absolutely. So from kindergarten to 6th grade, I went to public school, and it was really hard for me in school because I experienced a lot of different things all the time while trying to learn, and it made it basically impossible. I was not performing well and getting bullied all the time, even by my teachers, because there was a specific day where I was outside on the playground with the other kids, and I kind of went off to do my own thing because nobody really wanted to play with me. And I was standing over in a corner, and then I saw like these group of boys that I had never seen before, and they kept asking me to come over and play with them. And so I went over and played with them, excited to have friends. And all of a sudden, I noticed that something wasn't right. And the smallest boy of the group was like, "Yeah, I got hit by a car and I died." And I just like looked at him like, "I can't do this. I can't do this at school. I'm going to get in trouble." And before I could pull away and stop, one of my teachers came up behind me and was like, "What are you doing? There's nobody over here. Who are you talking to?" And I didn't even bother to try to explain it to her because I knew what would happen. And I remember her taking me inside of school, sitting me down with like my principal and telling me that I can't do stuff like that at school because I'm scaring other kids and they're not comfortable with it. And, they can't tell me what to believe in, but it's evil and I shouldn't be doing this. And just all of these things that I was a child, it wasn't my fault. I had no control over when and where that happens. And ever since that day, word like got out through our entire town that I was weird and that I was a child of the devil and like all of these terrible things that were said and done to myself and to my family, to the point where I got taken out of public school because it was too much on top of other things. But that one I remember the most. And I remember just like hating my ability because of it, because I felt like I could never get anywhere in life. I could never go up. It was just always pushing me back down.
Do you think that throughout history, a lot of people who have had your ability and are able to use it or so in tune where it just happens a lot have been misjudged and mislabeled as insane? Has
Oh,
that
yeah.
do you believe that's happened?
Oh, yeah, and it has happened for sure with my great-great-grandmother. She was a medium, a very powerful medium, but this would have been in, like, the early 1900s, so that was not something people were into. They immediately just assumed it was demonic and whatnot, and I remember one of her neighbors finding out that, she had that ability, and because my great grandmother had said that, there were demons that were talking to her and that she was scared. And she told my great grandfather, and a neighbor overheard that conversation and had her admitted to the Peoria State Hospital. And it breaks my heart to know that she had to live in a world like that where people thought she was insane just because of something she didn't have control over.
Yeah, that's terrible. Why is it that you think, certainly, at the very least, it's more accepted now and more celebrated? Why do you think that shift has happened?
I think it's because it's coming to a point where people don't care what other people think as much anymore. It's not seen as much of a threat as it used to be seen as, where people just immediately assumed it was evil. Um, but I mean, like, that does still happen, just not as much. And I think people are starting to wake up more and realize that there is more going on here than just you and me. And when you have somebody like myself or other mediums that are evidential, where we are able to tell people things that there is no way in hell we'd have any other way of knowing, it's just, I don't know how people could deny that. And more people like that are coming out and appearing and helping police and all sorts of things. So I think that's why it's changing. And I hope that it continues to change, because for my daughter in 10 years, I already know that she's a medium. So in 10 years from now, I want the world to be a better place for her to be able to, have her abilities and be safe with them and all of that stuff, and not have to worry about the things that I did.
I wonder if when you're a child and you have this ability, how different it would be if, let's say, the educational system or a school, or even a private school, would embrace those abilities and help enhance those and teach. You can only imagine right now what that would be like. We've read about stuff like that in fiction. I'm sure you've thought about that. Have you thought about that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I actually went to school to be a teacher once I graduated high school. And when I stopped teaching, like primary education, and I started doing work with mediumship, I decided I wanted to mix the two. I wanted to take everything that I learned in being a teacher and everything that I've learned in being a medium and put it together to teach other people that are like me to open themselves up and to embrace their abilities instead of being afraid of them, because there's so much stigma and fear that's put behind what all of this is really like, that it makes it really hard for people to be open to themselves. So when you're a child, you're even more vulnerable to the fear that's put behind paranormal and spirits and all that. So I cannot even imagine how just it would just be such an amazing shift to happen if that was acceptable and able to happen. But I don't truthfully know if it ever will be, unfortunately.
I wonder what it would require for that to happen. I guess it would be um, the participants, the parents, and the kids. And I guess you could form a school. I'm so curious as to see what the result would be long term for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too.
So, if you're comfortable with it, I'd love to hear more stories. Can you take me back a little bit to your childhood, adolescence, your teenage years, and tell me a few stories about how you've used this ability or how you were receptive to it?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we moved out of Washington, when I was about 6 or 7, we moved to a town called Germantown Hills in Illinois, which is like 15 minutes from where I live. And we moved into this house that we were all nearly certain was like some sort of opening to something very dark and demonic. And that had been confirmed by many other people that had came into this home too. And as soon as my family moved in there, we started to have all of these really horrible experiences, which is not something I ever experienced before, even as a medium. I had seen a lot of dark things and have had a lot of really bad nightmares and premonitions and whatnot, but nothing quite like we experienced at that house. And my mom being a medium, me being a medium, and my sisters also having capabilities, it was just kind of like a melting pot of energy all the time. And one of the things that I remember vividly was when I was a teenager, in this house. There's this entity that's been around my family for centuries that we all call Shadow Man. He looks like the stereotypical shadow person's tall, kind of like alien like build, but completely black. You can't see through him. He doesn't have features. And I remember going to take a vacuum cleaner up the steps, and I could just feel that he was behind me, but I didn't turn around and I didn't look because I didn't want to, because he's the only entity I had ever been, I don't even want to say afraid of, but intimidated by. And so I didn't. I just kept walking up the stairs, and I felt like I couldn't move, like my feet were stuck to the staircase, and then I just felt like I had to turn around and look at him, because if I didn't, he wouldn't go away. So I turned around and I saw him, and he started chasing me up the steps. And that same day, my youngest sister was at the top of the steps. She would have been like 3 or 4 at the time. And staying at the top of the steps, she just flew down the stairs and somehow did not get hurt. We don't know how it happened. There were people in our house that witnessed it too. And it was just things like that happened all the time. And that really started to make me fear my abilities, because I wasn't just experiencing spirits, I was experiencing the dark side of all of it too, which I don't talk about very much because, again, I don't want people to think that that's all that it is, but it's definitely a part of it. And
Well, speaking to that, what do you and again, it's out of in my thing, it's like I don't like I think the darkness is part of life, but I certainly don't want to exit on that ever. And but what do and again, I learn as I listen to you, and a lot of this is about my own curiosity too. It's what do you think this shadow man was like? If you could define it, or if you could put some kind of explanation to it.
so I guess the easiest way for me to answer that would be to start with, on my mom's side of the family, her grandmother, which would have been her father's mother, was 100% Cherokee Native American. And she was one of the most gifted mediums that I had ever heard of. She knew exactly when somebody was going to die, how they were going to die, and when it was going to happen. And she would go as far to try and stop it from happening if she could. And a way that she would know it was going to happen was she would see Shadow Man. And I mean, every time that it was going to happen to somebody, he would pop up, she would see him, and she would know that something terrible was going to happen to somebody, especially somebody she was around in that moment. And the weird thing is every time I see him, somebody dies. And now even my husband, who does not have any abilities at all whatsoever, he has even seen Shadow Man. So I think that he doesn't actually want to cause harm. He's just like foreshadowing, ironically, for what's going to happen. So he pops up to be like, hey, this is going to happen. But I don't think that there's anything I can do to stop what's going to happen. It's just like an omen for death or something like that.
And again, we've read about this, it goes way back to religious tomes and ancient texts and story and fiction, that there are these omens. They do exist. And I believe the source of those stories and mythology comes from experience. What you've experienced, people have experienced for centuries, if not millennia, and maybe even before that. And so, what I am going to get a little existential on this because you're somebody who has had a unique experience. There are a percentage of people that have experienced what you have, but not too many. And so you're part of a small group throughout history. Some of us have had things here and there. I had a couple of things happen, but not to an extreme. I've always been interested, though. And if you could talk about existence for a minute from your own experience, I think it allows someone like yourself to contemplate on that more, to really maybe understand it more, and have have a better definition. And if you don't, it's okay, but I'd love to hear
Sure.
your perspective.
Yeah. So, in my opinion, I think that our existence is infinite. I don't think that anyone has a set purpose. If we do have a purpose, I feel that it's also infinite. I think that every person here right now impacts another person, and then that person impacts another, and it's just like a domino effect. It's like we're all linked together, and we can't, do it without each other, and we're all important in this, chess game, and we all have to, follow each other's leads and work together to keep everything going. And I don't think that we as human beings can honestly comprehend what our existence actually means deeper than that, because I don't think we're meant to. Because then, if we knew, us as human beings would try to debunk it and pick it apart and think that we are as important as it might seem. And so that's where I always get stumped, as I get to a point where I just have to tell myself our existence is infinite and deeper than we have the capability to comprehend. Because if we could comprehend it, then we wouldn't be motivated to keep doing what we're supposed to do, and we would just kind of fight against it, because that's what, human beings are kind of known for doing.
And that's true. So then there is some grand design to this, as if this is almost a school, which I've heard before. What we're in right now is to learn and understand.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
Now okay, and again, not to dwell on the dark side, because I want to know both. I want to know the most terrifying experience you've had and the most beautiful experience you've had
Sure.
as a medium.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Um, I'd say the most terrifying experience I've ever had. I have two that are tied, so is it okay if I share both of them?
Of course.
The first one was a mediumship reading I was doing for a woman. Her husband was with her in Florida in the Keys, and they were on a big boat with their friends, and her husband had got out of the boat, just kind of raft on the water, not too far away from the boat either. And so she had only told me that part. And so I said, okay, well, I'm going to channel into this, and I want to see what happened, and I'll tell you everything that I see, and then you confirm it for me. That's how I start all of my readings, is I channel what happened when they died, and I look for the specific details of what happened, so that they have absolute proof that I'm communicating with their loved one before they even talk to them. And so I begun doing that. And where my vision started was him on this raft. And when I have visions, I am experiencing it like I am the person I'm channeling. So in this vision, I was him. So I'm on this raft, and I see this humongous dark shadow that's coming up out of the water. And before I can even react to it, I just feel myself get tugged by these like hot razor blades, is what it feels like. And then I see it, and it's a shark, like a shark with a head that's probably bigger than my entire upper body. And I just, I'm already terrified of sharks as it is. So, like, that was very traumatizing. But to feel the tugging and the pulling, and feel, not having legs anymore, and seeing that, because every time I have visions, I see it just as it happened. So there's no filter, there's no nothing. It's just as it is. And I remember coming out of that vision and throwing up, because I couldn't handle it, and that doesn't happen to me very often. I'm pretty good about being able to handle even the worst things that I've seen. And that one just got me really bad. And even after that reading, and even now, there are times where if I put my hands in water, or if I'm taking a shower or taking a bath, that vision just comes right back, and I'm right back into it again. And I don't know why that happens, but it does, and it's terrifying. Um, the guy did end up passing away, but he didn't pass away in the water. He passed away at a hospital. And I think about that guy every day, because it was like I had to feel like everything he felt when he died. And it's a really weird connection to have to another energy, is their death, because it's like the darkest thing that you go through in life is when you die. And I don't know, it's just, it'll always be with me forever. And that shark's face, I see that in my head every single day. um all the scars it had up its nose, and it's just it was wild. Yeah.
It's, I just have a question on this before we move to the next story. It's this, you know, it's this connection. It's almost like a transfer of consciousness. You become
Yeah,
them for a moment in a way, correct?
exactly. Yeah,
Okay, wow.
exactly like that. Yeah.
And even outside of trauma, to feel what it's like to be somebody else for a moment.
Yeah,
I
it's
get,
wild.
number one, it's the deepest, most profound form of empathy that I
Exactly.
could think
Yeah.
of. But to feel like them, I wonder sometimes, just in general, not even conscious of any particular ability, what it would be like to feel, to be somebody else for a moment, to feel that, to feel their history. Do you feel all of that when you experience this?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
It's difficult to define, but I just, it's an amazing, um, I think it's an amazing concept that hasn't really been explored too much, maybe in some words, but just in terms of how ultimately that entire spectrum feels.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree 100%. It's definitely like you switch souls for a minute. Like you are living everything they lived, everything they felt, everything they tasted, they heard, everything. And sometimes, because of how strong that connection is, after it's over with, a piece of that will stay with me forever. Like with the water, my brain automatically has connected the water that I'm touching as that vision I had. So it's just like a little piece of them is kind of with me forever. And I am thankful for what I'm able to do and all of the people that I've been able to help. But at the same time, that's a lot to carry as a person when you don't know what to do with it other than just accept it and live with it.
Sure, and that becomes very overwhelming. And I definitely want to talk about that after the stories are over, like for sure. I want to talk about what that is, what that burden is.
Yeah, absolutely. So the other story that I have was back at the Hell House, is what I'll call it. Um, we were all getting ready to go to bed, and I remember going upstairs and running a bath because I was going to take a bath. And I got in the bathtub. I was probably like 15, maybe. And I had always been very afraid of that bathroom because it just didn't feel right. And so when any of us would shower or take a bath in there, we always had somebody else with us in case something happened. And my sister couldn't be in there because she had to go to bed for school. And I told my dad I'd be fine. And he was like, okay, well, scream or something if you need me. And I said, I'd be fine. So I get in the water. And not even minutes after that, I felt like something put its hand around my throat and pushed me down underneath of the bath water. And I couldn't scream for my dad because I was under the water, but I was banging on the side of the bathtub. And my dad ran in and was trying to lift me out of the water and literally couldn't move me. And my dad's a very strong man. Like he's done construction his whole life. So there would have been no reason why he couldn't have been able to move me. And I remember being pulled out of whatever happened, and whatever touched me had left the room because my dad was screaming at it to stop, and just looking at my dad and him looking at me. And I'm like, it's not going to stop until it kills one of us. And I think about that day every day as well. It's just crazy.
And a lot of people, when they hear these stories, the only thing they can associate with are horror films, you know?
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
but this is real life. Now, okay, and if this can be defined in words, because it's difficult, and I know, like I'm always exploring this just as somebody who writes fiction and is exploring these subjects. I'm getting ready to make a horror film myself, and I'm always trying to find that metaphysical space that is the difference between something supernatural that is that really happens and something that's supernatural that's portrayed in film. If you could articulate that, what is the difference?
Um, Rather than magic, there's energy. So I think that, in a lot of like different TV shows and movies with spirits and demons and whatever else, there's always some sort of, magical touch to it. But where I think the difference is we don't have magic, we have energy, which is very similar, it just has a different name because our energy exists. It's able to transform, it's able to do all kinds of crazy things. And that's what I think the difference is. If instead of painting the picture with magic as what, fixes everything or gives something negative power, it's just their energy. And energy can't be destroyed, but it can be transformed, just like when people do spells in movies and they have to do it in a particular way to, undo whatever they did. It's the same kind of thing with energy work where you have to do things a certain way, everything's intention based. And as, human beings and existing here with, an infinite purpose, our energy is very sacred and it's very special. And of course, negative things want a piece of that because they want a piece of that power, just like in movies where, there's a person that has like a magic amulet and something negative wants to steal it away from them because it's powerful. But we are what's powerful. We don't need, the amulets or the magic. It's just us and our energy that makes it different.
So when a person is feeling this, the energy is transferred, and let's say, and again, I don't want you to sit and relive this, but I'm trying to, I want to understand in ways that we haven't really discussed before. Many people don't discuss it this way. And so we go back to that place where you were in the tub and you're attacked. Physiologically, or at least psychologically, you start to feel heavy. You start to feel an immense amount of fear. Perhaps you get dizzy. Do you
Yeah.
feel physical forces pushing you in, or is it almost like you lose consciousness?
So when it first started, I remember just feeling the same kind of pressure as it would have been if something physically would have had its hand on my throat. So it was like the same force, same pressure, just the hand wasn't there, but it felt like a hand was there. And then I remember another hand either on my head or my face or something that just pushed me backwards. But I didn't see the hands. I just felt the same kind of pressure as it would have been, if a grown up would have had both of their hands on me at the time, pushing me underneath the water as hard as they could have. And when I went into the water, I was trying to see whatever was there because I knew if I could see it, then I could get rid of it. Because if I knew what it was, it'd be easier to get rid of it. And it would never show me what it was because if it would have, I would have known, and it didn't want me to know. So I just felt this just darkness and this just the kind of evil where it makes your stomach hurt. And I just remember vividly that it just wanted to kill me. That was the only kind of impression or anything I got from it, was it wanted me to die. And I still don't know why. I still don't know whatever became of whatever it is, but I think about it all the time.
And so, in other words, so here's, and this is terrifying, and it's been described by other people too. They've had similar experiences as you. For instance, the entity case from the early '70s, Doris Bither, which was later translated into a book and a motion picture. She had described, to put it so plainly, her rape by these things, and other people have too. And it it's tantamount to a lot of the things that have been written about what have been called demons, and whether they're demons or discorporated spirits of people who are depraved. I wonder what can you do to stop something like this for other people that may be experiencing this right now. What,
Absolutely. So when my family had enough. I mean, we lived there for like 12 years, so it was an all day, everyday thing for 12 years straight. And we just got to a point where after priests didn't work, blessings didn't work, we had paranormal investigators come to our house and it didn't work. So I tried to take things into my own hands to research and practice and do whatever I could to get it to go away, and that didn't work. We stopped giving it so much power by being afraid of it. And what we did was we stood in the heart of our home. So it would have been our living room. We stood there and we just screamed at it to leave over and over and over again. All of us together just told it to leave. And then, it was only 15 minutes later that you could just feel it was different. It was just like it was all gone. And it didn't last forever. It came back shortly after, but the purpose of why I bring that up is because we are stronger than whatever that is. You just have to believe that you are. And in my personal opinion, because I'm not a super religious person, I believe that the reason the Bible is powerful and different things to do with religion are because of the person behind it. If you believe that there's power in something, then there's power in something, and nothing's going to change your mind. So when you use that power, when you're reading a Bible out loud in a room, telling something to leave and to get out, and you truthfully believe it, it's going to work because of your energy, because you're the one putting your foot down with your energy and saying, no more, you can't be here anymore. And so we would just do that over and over and over and over again, as many times as it took. And then when we did finally leave that house, it must have stayed there because it didn't come with any of us, thankfully.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
There are those who say that this quiet town holds many secrets. Legend has it that beneath this very tower, a dark force had its eyes set on the children.
We were told that what was going on there was for the benefit of humanity.
What would you say to the people who say, well, all these children were kidnapped and murdered and you were a part of it? What would you tell them?
I did approve of it, but there was nothing I could do about it.
They wanted a large number of programmed boys to be used for mind control operations.
And there are others who say it's still happening to this day.
I don't know, I for myself find it a little suspicious that all the evidence has been conveniently destroyed.
Let's put it this way. If you're sitting there with 20 guns pointed at you, what are you going to do? Whatever the hell they want!
Watch Montauk Chronicles now for free on Tubi, Plex, Roku, and available for download on Amazon and Apple TV.
This series presents information based in part on theory and conjecture. The producer's purpose is to suggest some possible explanations, but not necessarily the only ones, to the mysteries we will examine.
So, well, what are some of the most beautiful experiences you had with your ability?
Oh, I've had so many that I'm so fortunate and thankful for. Let's see. So there is this guy named Jacob. He is a spirit that I am actually friends with. So there are some spirits that do quite literally become my friends because we work together so much, and I I'm always communicating with them or helping them with something. So they just eventually become friends with me and hang out in my house, or they're just here whenever I need them to be or whenever they want to be. And so with Jacob, he had, like, in the very beginning, he came to me when I was doing a Facebook Live, because I used to do those with readings to, help people get messages from their loved ones. And so I was in the middle of doing a Facebook Live, and at the very end of it, I felt another spirit come up from behind me. And I was like, hey, I'm done right now. You can come back later. But then he was like, no, ma'am, I need your help. Please, I need your help. And he was very persistent, but very kind about it. And so I said, okay, I'll help you. And we kind of talked for a little while. And so I told him to come back the next day, and I will get on Facebook Live again, and I will tell, everybody on Facebook what you told me, so that maybe we can find your family. And so he came back, and I did. And right away, like, he had 30 something people in there that were like, oh my God, it's Jacob. That's him. And ever since then, I had probably, just with the people that he knew and loved alone, done hundreds of readings with his family and his friends, because he was a very incredible person and still is now, where he goes out of his way to bring spirits to me that need help, or, being there for people in spirit, keeping them safe, or whatever he can do. He's always doing that. But the thing that has been the most incredible with Jacob is just knowing that I always have something around me that's protecting me. And we never knew each other before, only afterwards, after he passed away. And I wrote a book a few months ago, and in the book, I got about halfway through it, and I was like, I don't know what else to write about. And he came to me and we talked about it, and I was like, what if I interviewed you in the book and you told me about everything that happens when you pass away, from the moment that you die until how you feel right now? Walk me through what it's like to be a spirit. And so he did. And the half of my book that's about spirit is all written in his perspective and everything that he experienced. And he brought so much peace and so much comfort to so many people, just helping me do that. It's just, I don't have a word for how amazing he is, just because it's something I can't put into words. But I think that the connection I have with him is probably the most beautiful out of everybody I've connected to.
Did he ever explain how he can see you? In other words, how are the spirits on the other side able to locate someone with your ability? Do they? Is it? I mean, we're thinking in three, or I'm thinking in three dimensions right now. But what's the difference? Like, time doesn't exist in the same way.
Yeah, from what he showed and told me, because he kind of did a similar thing where, like, when I channel somebody's passing and I can see what happened from start to finish with how they passed, he did the same thing for me and his perspective of spirit right after he passed away and what he saw. And so from what he showed me, there's like this little, like, school that they go to as soon as they pass away. And when they get to the school gives them like a rundown of everything that happens over there and how everything works, and what they can do as spirits and how they can interact with things and getting used to their new body and their new form. Because he told me that when he left a physical body and went into a non-physical body, he didn't anticipate it to feel so weird, because you get so used to having arms and legs and all of that, and you don't have that in a physical sense anymore. So you kind of just feel like jello, is what he said it felt like. So it's like getting used to being a spirit. And he said that when they come here to interact with people here, they can either do it on their free will, wherever they want to go, however they want to. They can see us just like a living person can see us. They can interact with things sometimes if they want to, if they have enough energy to, but they mostly kind of just like watch and make sure everybody's okay. But every perspective he's ever shown me is like, if you just sat up like a camera and just the angle of the camera being high up in the room, like bird's eye view, and if it was just monitoring a room, that's kind of how spirits see us. And the reason that he found me is, I guess there's a way over there where they can pick to go to somebody like myself right at a certain time in a certain place, and it's all supposed to work out exactly as it's meant to. So when he came up behind me during that Facebook Live, that was planned on his behalf, not on mine. So he showed up right when he was supposed to, and that's how everything came to be. So there is free will, but at the same time, it's like free will is set up to be fated in one way or another, from what I gather, at least.
It's just so amazing that you have that connection. And I definitely want to get into your perspective on your particular afterlife, leaving this physical. But are there any other profound experiences that brought you into the light, into the understanding, outside of that communication with that particular spirit?
Yeah, I think that one of the most profound experiences I've ever had, and I've had it a few times, but I kind of encapsulate it all into one just because the feelings are always the same for me. And that is, after being told like my entire life pretty much that, my abilities were evil and there was nothing positive that could come from them, and different people wanted to pray them away and whatever. There have been times where I have been approached by law enforcement and different, government officials to assist in things that they don't know where to go on. They don't know, what lead to follow with a missing person. Or there was a time where I had to do like I don't want to say a fake reading, but a reading with this couple that, I had suspected was a suspect of something, and so did the police. And eventually they ended up confessing it in the middle of a session with me. And then I watched them on TV get put away in prison. It was very surreal to see that my abilities were able to do something so good after being told for so long that they couldn't possibly be used for anything good like that. And knowing that I have that capability helps me every time I need to remember why I do this and why it's not just a curse, that there's blessings to it as well. Because not only can I help people that have already passed on, but I can help people that are still here, and that's a good comforting feeling to have.
Of course. In regard to that, let's say when you speak to someone new or even someone you've known for a while, do you feel obligated or tempted to tell them about certain things when you get in contact with them?
Yeah, it depends on kind of the situation. So there are times where, I will shake somebody's hand and I'll start having a vision of something, or I'll feel something's off from someone and I'll kind of pull back a little bit, or or the opposite, where I feel like somebody's grandmother's around them or their brother or whoever it might be. And I can kind of tell whether or not a person is going to be open with that, or if they would be offended by it. And when I can feel that they're okay with it, I'll give it a little bit, and then I'll just kind of hint at it somehow. Like there was a lady I worked with a long time ago before I was ever public about being a medium, and her mother had just passed away not long before we had this conversation. And I didn't know this. I went up to her and I was like, Tammy, there's somebody that's around you, and I don't know how else to tell you this, but I think that it's your mom. And is that necklace that you're wearing, is that hers? And then she just started crying. And she was like, yes, my mom just passed away, and this was her necklace. And that was a very like comforting feeling too, to know that my first time going up to somebody and telling them that, like face to face, that wasn't my family or what have you, and they accepted it and they were okay with it and it was valid, made me feel really good. But yeah, if I ever need to, I do, but if I don't, then I don't, because there are a lot of situations where there's nothing that I can do. There's nothing that I can't stop a lot of things from happening. I can tell people what not to do to avoid certain places and certain things to keep them safe. But then there's also times where like I can't do anything about it. And if I do try to do something about it, it's like this snowball effect where all of these horrible things are going to happen because something in this timeline or whatever got messed up. So it's like there's one of my best friends used to tell me like the Spider-Man quote of with great power comes great responsibility. And that's so true because there is a lot of power to this and it takes a lot of responsibility because if I wanted to, I could tell everybody everything all the time, but I don't do that because I know that we're not meant to know everything, if that makes sense.
No, it does. I think if you knew everything, then that the things that you learn along the way would be depleted, and the experience of life would be depleted too. You need to improve as a human and as a soul.
Exactly, yeah.
So, in regard to those beautiful and those profound experiences, and they must have changed you along the way too, right? I mean, your perspective as a little girl is quite different than it is now, regardless of
Exactly,
that
yeah.
consistent ability, correct?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. And now as a mother and you have your own family. Oh, this is important. And again, this is connected to the question I was about to ask, but
Sure.
just like you can read and understand individuals,
Mhm.
can you perceive the world and the way history is unfolding as well with this?
Yes.
Okay, can you tell me a little bit about that?
Um, so just to make sure I understand correctly, are you talking about like things to come in the future, like to our world and those kind of things?
Yes, like outcomes of things, obviously that you must have had a heavy feeling just before March of 2020, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's very odd and I don't know why it's been happening this way, but when my daughter was born, I had this horrible, just terrible feeling that something really bad was coming. And it was more than just, like postpartum anxiety or postpartum depression. Like something was coming and I could not deny it. I couldn't push it away. There was nothing I could do. And I knew it was another one of those situations where there was nothing that I could do. I just had to be here and be prepared for whatever was going to come. And I told my husband that something was going to happen and he was like, "No, it's going to be fine. You're just worried. It's okay." And then I remember coronavirus coming on the TV for the first time, and I'm like, that's what's going to do it. I'm like, this is going to be so bad. And I'm like, we need to be ready because this is going to be way worse than anybody can even comprehend right now. And he's like, there's no way it'll make it over here. We're going to be fine. And then 2 weeks later, the president was on TV telling everybody, like, we're locking down the country basically. And go get what you need to get because we're all going to go into lockdown. And I remember my husband's face was just like blank because he believes me and he knows that I can do all the things that I can do. But when it's happening to us and there are things that I feel and I foresee that happen to us, I think that's what's really like that really gets him. And it gets me too. But he just, I don't think he questioned me much ever again after that. But when my daughter turned 1, we were put in lockdown. And then when my daughter turned 2, we were put in lockdown again. And then when she turned 3, the war in Ukraine started. And now for her 4th birthday, we have all of the things that are happening with, like the UFOs and all this other really crazy stuff that's happening. So I don't know why that keeps happening with her birthdays. Like, there's always something insanely crazy that happens right beforehand. It's wild, but right before the war in Ukraine happened, I started to have all of these horrible nightmares about different things that were going to happen. I'm not good at drawing, but I did my best to like sketch different things that I saw, or my husband's an artist, so I would tell him and he would sketch it. And there were times on the news where things I had sketched, we held up to the TV and they were exactly as what I, foresaw. And those kind of things infuriate me because I don't know why I see them if there's nothing I can do to stop them. It's just like being burdened with all of this information that you can't do anything with. And, because there's nobody I can call and be like, hey, this is going to happen at this place at this time, so get ready, because, it just doesn't work like that. So that part really sucks too.
Why is it that it's almost like and I'm a huge Twilight Zone fanatic, the original.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of science fiction writers were actually prophets, like the prophets of the past actually transferred over into horror fiction and science fiction. And Stephen King has predicted a lot of things, believe it or not. And,
Yeah.
Richard
Absolutely.
Matheson, Rod Serling, H.G. Wells, all of these incredible, Philip K. Dick, they've all predicted things well before they happened. What is it that you think is different that's allowing all of this stuff now to come to fruition, especially all this talk about UFOs and the way the world is? I never thought there could be this level of deceit, because there's obviously some deceit that's happening and major manipulation. I never thought that could happen in the modern world. I guess I was naive. Why do you think that is?
Me too. I think it's because we're so divided, and there are some of us that are awake, and then there are some of us that just walk around with our eyes closed, not wanting to really see and understand what's happening here. Because if we are awake and we're aware of everything that's going on, we're going to start asking questions. And when those questions get answered truthfully, then that's going to be a threat to people that don't want their power to be threatened. And it's easier to make us all believe that everything is okay and everything is taken care of and that there is nothing greater than us out there. Because if we knew the truth and we knew that there was, and what actually is happening, nobody would want to follow the rules that are set in place right now. Everybody would be wanting to know more and more and more to become what we are intended to be, and that's not to be controlled by a government that claims they're not doing that. And I think that that's why people are waking up, because they're having the experiences themselves. They don't need somebody to tell them what's happening, because they're seeing it and they're feeling it and they're hearing it themselves. So it's one thing to hear somebody else experience it, but then for, yourself to experience it's different. And more people are having those realizations and experiences. So the more that happens, the more people are waking up. And so that's why I think that, the people that are higher up are really intimidated by that, and they want to shut it all down, because it's getting to a point where they're not going to be able to stop it if more people become more aware and perceive things for how they actually are, which nothing that we see on TV for the most part is how it actually is.
So do you believe that we're currently experiencing some kind of spiritual and metaphysical awakening that really hasn't happened before?
I definitely don't think it was a planned thing to happen, but I think it had to happen because there are so many of us that 20 years ago were not aware of the things we're aware of now. We weren't as aware of our own emotions. We weren't as aware of the people around us. We weren't as aware of the way that the world actually works, because we weren't really taught a lot of that. We were kind of taught, don't ask too many questions and just take it as it is. And none of us want to do that. We want all the answers. We want to know how everything works. And if it works against us, then how do we fix that? And so I think it's a physical and spiritual thing that's happening. It's like this movement that, it's going to do good. I know that. It's going to be hard, but it's going to do good as long as we stick to believing that what we're experiencing is real and not letting all of that pull us back into not trusting our intuition or not asking questions or not wanting better for ourselves and for our children. It's just, it all ties in together, I think. Like the UFO thing got me the most because I have a lot of theories about UFOs, and I'm personally, I'm petrified of aliens. I don't know why, but I always have been. But something I told my husband was like, if there are aliens, I don't know why they would want to be here, first of all. But if there are aliens, maybe they're coming because they know something that's going to happen that we don't know. Like they want to, make sure that we stop something from happening that could potentially happen. And one of my like premonitions that I had, I guess, I don't know if it was just a dream or whatever, but I had a premonition where there is a nuclear war that happens. And I told my husband when I had that I think the aliens might know that's going to happen, and they know what that could do to not only our world, but the other ones as well. And that's why they've come here, because they want us to stop that from happening, because maybe they have a way to time travel or something. If they have technology that's capable of doing what they can do, if they're in other galaxies, then I'm sure they can time travel. And so just the fact that we shot them down and now we don't know anything about them is very odd to me. Like, how do we just forget that happened and moved on from it? It's just beyond me, I guess.
Yeah, and that speaks to my next question. Are there any specifics that you feel strongly about that are about to occur, let's say within the next year or 2 years?
Yeah. So the biggest one that I have right now is that our economy is going to completely crash. And I mean, like, it will crash worse than it did in 2008. And after it does crash, everything will get picked back up and put back together the way that it should be. So it's almost going to be like a blessing and a curse at the same time. And if we pull through the curse part of it, the blessing will last for a long time, because I think we almost need that reset, especially in our economy. So that one didn't make me feel like impending doom like some of them do. That one made me feel like it has to happen, like we have to restart. And another one I've still had for a while is nuclear war. I don't ever really talk about them because I don't want to freak people out, and I don't want to be like fear-mongering anybody, but I feel it, yeah. And I don't think that it will happen here. I think it will happen between Russia and Ukraine, and then we'll have to get involved. But I don't think it will hit us here. It's just going to hit us in different ways, like through our allies and whatnot. But that won't stop. Like, that war won't stop until that happens, I feel like.
And it's not that it hasn't happened before either. It did in World War II. It's what ended the war. So it's not unheard of. And I think, why is it, do you think, that people get so complacent that they don't think these things can happen, even though much worse is happening right before their eyes?
Exactly. Denial. I think it's a lot easier to deny that something like that could happen than to accept that it could, because then if you accept that it can happen, then you have to be prepared for it and you have to know how to react to it. And like I said, it's a lot easier to walk through this life with your eyes closed than to have them open, because when they're open, you have to see what's actually happening. And I think that all kind of ties back into that.
Is there anything you can tell people who have these little moments with ability that might be able to harness it or use it better?
So the way that I learned how to open myself up further was by not allowing fear to keep me from digging further. And the way that I did that was I took in every piece of information I possibly could. I read every book, I looked at every website, every online resource, I watched so many YouTube videos. I absorbed everything that I could, whether it was good, bad, or ugly. I absorbed all of it. And from there, whether it scared me or not, knowing that I'm aware and I am educated on the bad things just as much as the good things with my abilities made me feel more powerful, because if you have knowledge, then you have power. And that took the hesitation away. And once the hesitation was gone, I started to make myself become more aware. And the way that I did that was I stopped telling my gut that it was wrong. I let it lead me. So if I started to get a gut feeling that I shouldn't go somewhere at a certain day at a certain time, I trusted that with all my heart. And every time it served me right. And the more you do that, and the more you are aware of what you are experiencing, more than just physically, the more experiences you'll happen, because they're happening around you all day, every day, 365. Spirits are always here. Energy is always here. You're just not awake enough yet to realize that. And when you start navigating through every situation in life and seeing it for more than what it really is, by just what you feel, I guess, that's all you need to do. You just have to pay attention to what you feel, not what you see, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think a lot of the times people are ignoring that intuition as just a passing feeling, or
Exactly, yeah.
and it really is just that inner voice screaming at them or
Exactly.
talking to them.
Right.
And I ask everybody this on the way out. And obviously, there's no wrong or right answer. It's whatever you say. And I know that you believe that there's more to this. And when we leave the physical, there's something else. So when you do leave this physical existence that you're in currently, what would you take with you?
That is not the end, because there's always going to be another opportunity to live again. There's always going to be another opportunity to die again, because we have to. It never stops. Our energy can't be destroyed. So when I leave this world and go into the next world, I will feel like I did what I needed to do here, and I'll be ready to do what I need to do again, because, just like every day is kind of the same but a little different, I think that's what our next lives are like. They're kind of the same thing but a little different, because there's something new we're meant to learn in every life. So I will leave this world proud of what I've done and go into the next ready to do what I'm supposed to do there too.
Welcome back to Off to the Witch. I'm your host, Christopher Garitano, and I want to thank you for joining the conversation tonight. Allie's ability, as many of you already know, is a real phenomena. I've personally experienced it, hearing voices from beyond only once in my life. In all honesty, I'm grateful to not have the antenna that Allie is blessed with. So, if you hear strange things tonight on your way to dreamland, they just might be whispers from another world. Until next time, try to enjoy the daylight.